asking. You're in Utah. Fires out there. We're going to go ahead and get going. Thank you for joining us today. We are on our ZENcast in August. Today we're going to have Bob Reynolds, our ZENworks system engineer, talk about ZSD asset management. I said ZSD asset management. Wait a minute. I know about ZENworks. Well, he's going to explain it to us, so we'll have some idea of what's going on there. A little bit of housekeeping tips. Log into your chat and you can join us with conversation. If you do an @ sign in front of the name of the person that you see highlighted in the chat window, you can direct message them. We'll have some polls. If we have polls, you'll see it come into chat. That way you can participate. And then the exclamation commands is good. So you'll see throughout my presentation exclamation points in front of particular characters. Like if I do YT settings, I think that's, whoops. Oh, wow. Wait a minute. Let's go back here. Didn't do that one right. Let me go into chat here and then I'll do it. So exclamation YT settings, it will give you that full link, okay, or at least that explanation. So if we did exclamation KB, that's for knowledge base. You can get the link and then just click on it in chat. So logging into chat is very beneficial. So do log into chat if you can, and that way you can get to those links. YouTube settings, good to have it on autoplay is turned off and auto 720p60 HD on, so it doesn't keep adjusting and trying to adjust for you. And you get to that through the gear down below on your YouTube. And then subscribe and notifications. Be sure to subscribe to this channel as we go live. If you're logged into YouTube, you'll get a notification that we're going live. So be aware that those are there. And next we have, hey, thank you very much everybody that participated in the TTP Virtual Conference 2020 USA. It was a very big success, so we want to thank you for that. Also just want to shout out that this particular ZENcast is on the YouTube channel, and the dates are the 1st and the 3rd Tuesday of every month at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, North America. So subscribe to this channel and you'll be able to get some, when we go live, you'll be able to see that we're going live as a reminder. We normally go on about 20 minutes prior so that you can adjust your time and close things out if you want to attend. All right. Let's go to what's next. New quarterly webinars coming soon. So we have quarterly webinars typically, and we have a new stuff coming in update 2, the malware. We have new Micro Focus desktop containers coming out in September or so. So we'll be having some webinars pertaining to whatever the topics we have engineers working on, so that you can get some up to the latest information. And then the recordings are there. It's a nice index of recordings. You can go ahead and select exclamation Q2 webinars and you'll get that particular link. Product news all over the place. ZENworks configuration management. Of course, the current version is ZCM 2020 update 1, right? There's a ZDC and an agent cleanup for that. If you go to the TID 7024-523, you'll be able to get the update. You'll have a link to the update 1, the ZDC, the agent cleanup. And then the ZCM Pro August 2020 just came out. I saw it last night. So it's there. And then we did recently have image driver updates for ZCM 2017 update 1, 2, 3, and 4, and imaging driver update for 2020 and 2020 update 1. Okay. Also, remember that ZCM 2017 committed support ends the 31st of October this year. So if you're still on the 11.4 or 2017, connect with us so that we can help you get to 2020 and understand the easiest path for you and get you on the latest and current version so that you can take advantage of all those features. ZENworks Service Desk currently at 8.1.2, but version 8.2 beta is starting right now. So please email zen@microfocus.com if you want to participate in that beta. It's fantastic to learn about the product that will be released so that you can get a preview of it and actually talk to engineers about things that work, don't work, or even just your ideas on how you can make it better. So if you want to participate in that beta, please, zen@microfocus.com. ZENworks reporting server is at version 7.2. And there are DB migrations tools. You've heard this before if you've been on the channel before. For ZCM, Sybase, of course, 2020 doesn't support Sybase. So if you're on 2017 and you're on Sybase, you need to migrate. We have a great migration tool for that. Hey, Don, nice to have you here this morning. Thanks for joining us. We also have migration tools for 2020, MS SQL or Oracle to PostgreSQL. Okay, so the documentation, you'll be able to see in the documentation those particular things and the restrictions and system requirements. And then ZSD does have an MS SQL to PostgreSQL. If you're moving that particular database, there is a separate DB migration tool for Service Desk. And then MFDC, again, recently we had a release 12.7, I think in June, but in September, around September, I can't quote September for sure, but around September timeframe, we'll have version 20, and it's going to have some great features for working at home. It's going to be fantastic. So stay tuned for that. Hey, Martin, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Glad to have you. We'll go ahead to the next is the resources. You've seen this before. There's some COVID resources that Micro Focus is providing, some tools to secure and connect your users. Newly designed Micro Focus support pages, ideas portal, product lifecycle, and product resources. And I think I want to go one more because we're going to click on, where is that? Oh, we're getting to it. Okay. And so you've seen ideas portals. Please put those in. Product lifecycle, you can see where that particular product ends. So you need to know, you can understand and map out your migration to the latest product. And then product resources, of course. On-demand training. There's a course catalog out there, even if you don't own on-demand training, because it is a purchase where you can get some formal training. And those trainings are accredited through the Acclaim badges, which is common now. And there are also free on-demand training out there as well. So take a look at that course catalog and you'll be able to see what's out there and learn some great stuff. Hey, Brent, thanks for joining us. Good morning. Education Central's out there, knowledge base is out there, product forums. So in this case, if you wanted to know the on-demand training without having to write down all those words, you can, in chat, you can do exclamation, oops, hang on. I'm going to do it again. Hang on. Let's go here. Exclamation OD. And you should be able to, you can just do it in chat yourself if you're logged in. And it'll come up with the link to that. Okay, so that's what those exclamation points are there for your easy accessibility to those links. All right. And then finally, new training. There's a formal ZENworks patch management training available. Again, Acclaim badges. So if you do own on-demand or if you want to purchase the patch management training, you can. If you don't already own on-demand. And it's the latest patch management that's out there. So we appreciate them putting that together and getting that all taken care of for us. Searching Micro Focus site. I learned something new today, so I really want to click on this and get to another page here. So one thing I did learn is if I'm looking for a TID, for instance, if I'm looking for my cookbook, you can just put it right here. And it'll go out and search it in the knowledge base, and you can see the cookbooks. Okay, so you don't even have to drill into it, which I thought we had to do, but you can, because we used to remember the support and services, and it takes a little bit longer. But right here from the search, they've added that in, which makes it really convenient for us. And I think I have another one that I wanted to searching Patch Finder. If you're looking for your patches, We're going to go ahead and select that. As you know, you could just go to novell.com/patch/finder. And if you put in your product here, and we'll go ZCM, then you could pick your version. So I didn't even bother with the version or anything. I could pick configuration update 1, and there you have your imaging driver update. You have your PRU, you have your cleanup utility, and ZENworks Diagnostic Center. So, and the actual update itself. So if you're back on 17 update 3, you can click on that to get those patches. Okay, really handy. Thought it might be useful for you. Remember that it's Patch Finder, so it's currently download.novell.com/patch/finder if you're not familiar with that. Okay, so I hope that helps. A couple of exciting things that we have for added benefit are some newsletters. It's the Security Engage newsletter and the Security Impact newsletter. It comes out once a month, right around the middle of the month, and we try to put our training in there. We try to put our webinars in there, tips and tricks, the ZENcast. We try to put all that stuff out there so that we can you have access to it and you can reap from those information newsletters. So if the Engage is here, if I did Engage, and then if I did SRG, which is Security Risk and Governance, you'll have those links. And those are the July ones. Nice newsletter. Comes out, again, once a month. And it has different things, not just ZENworks. It has Filer. It has a lot of the different Micro Focus products in it. And it's basically for the customers to see activity that's going on with those products. All right? So know that those are there and utilize those if that's a good resource for you. ZENcast demo, the last one we had. ZENworks zone design, sizing, and maintenance. We had a lot of slides because it's such a huge topic, right? If you need information on that, or if you weren't able to download the spreadsheet that I had, feel free to contact me, paul.pedron@microfocus.com, and I'll be happy to send that to you. There's so many things in ZENworks and so many schedules, so many dedicated servers for different things. And when you're doing your migration or you're decommissioning a primary, you want to make sure you have some of those things known so that you can move it before you actually decommission a server or move the server. So, topic update. Today we're having asset management with Bob Reynolds, ZENworks system engineer. August 18th, we're having part 2. Part 2 with Vikram Goyal. We had him on doing the ZENworks MDM, and he got through some of the settings, and we got to the iOS, but we never got to the Android. So he's going to come. He wanted to come back. We had some requests for him to come back so that he can finish up with the settings, finish up with Android, and we can have a better understanding on the full picture of the MDM. So he's coming in 2 weeks. So that's great to have him come aboard. September 1st and 15th our September ZENcasts. We're going to be covering some of these products, either ZENworks system auto builds. Peter Sumption might be back to do that. Inventory management, bundles, and virtual applications. And I'm hoping that the desktop containers is available, the 20, so we can brag about that and show you that stuff. Okay. Again, we've had some requests. These are some of the listed requests that we've had for future topics and demonstrations. We're trying to cover those, trying to get them all in through these ZENcasts. We have a short amount of time, just a couple hours to do that every other week, so we're trying to get to those. But I think if there's a better way, or I mean, this is for you guys. We want this to be your forum for ZENworks administrators to request and have different topics come up, conversations in chat, so that we can. It doesn't have to be tailored to what we're talking about. If you have an off topic, we want to make sure that we at least include that and get back to you with anything if you have another off topic. So these are some of the things that we're going after. Of course, patch and CVE, malware is coming real soon, right? It's coming in update 2, so that's exciting. and then we had endpoint encryption and so forth. Okay. Again, channel communication, log into YouTube chat, participate. I appreciate those that have logged in, Brent, Martin, Kurt, Don. Feel free to chat out or shout out, and that's what it's all about, is getting to know your colleagues as well. So we're excited you're here, and you can also direct message with an @ sign in front of the name. So ZENcast Lab Talk, it's about time. All right, now that we've covered all the primary things and you have some upcoming news that you're now aware of, we're going to get into some ZENcast Lab Talk. And part of this is today's topic is ZSD asset management. And today's guest is Bob Reynolds. I'm going to free up his mic here real quick. Hang on a second, Bob. Bob, go ahead and give me a shout out.
Yep. Hey, Bob.
There he is. Bob, thank you for joining us today. You're our guest, Micro Focus Systems engineer. He's been out on pre-sales calls, after-sales calls, demos for. You've done quite a bit of things going on here, Bob. I appreciate your activity and support for the customers out there. And today we're doing asset management, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you have your own set of slides, so I'm gonna take this slide down. Hang on a second. Let me minimize this. Go like this, and we're gonna go like this. And we have a go-to meeting with Bob. We're not using Teams. Where's your go-to meeting? There it is. All right, Bob, I got your slides up here now. You're looking good. Go ahead. Let's have a conversation about asset management.
Okay, that sounds great. So I think one thing, Paul, by the way, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Again, my name is Bob Reynolds. I've been with the company just over 21 years, heavily focused in the ZENworks product set. So I'm pretty excited to have this conversation, and I can't tell you enough how many times like Paul and the support team or myself on the sales team, we get calls from our customers saying, hey, I need to do some asset management. Can you help me? And asset management to me is one of those ubiquitous terms, right? It potentially means so much. So generally when Paul and I get the opportunity to hear that from you, we start to help break down what potential options you have. So I thought we'd just kind of formally describe the options we have available with ZENworks. So today's session is just this broader topic around asset management. And there's a couple things inside ZENworks that can help potentially meet your requests. So we'll go ahead and get started. And quick idea around the agenda. Inside the ZENworks family of products is a component that we call asset inventory. I'd like to better explain what's available with that. And then as we jump forward, we actually have a product called ZENworks Asset Management, and then have the opportunity to explain what that is. But then if you're looking for something a little bit more holistic, beyond our asset inventory, beyond our version of ZENworks Asset Management, and trying to do more holistic asset management, well, that's where Paul was alluding to ZENworks Service Desk and what's kind of interesting there. So I want to just expose some of the thoughts there. So get through these explanations. We use a couple slides. The idea there is then to dive into a demo environment and just start exploring, maybe refreshing some of these ideas for you, but ideally sort of create these distinctions available with ZENworks to help you address an asset management program. All right, so again, today's focus is all around the ZENworks family of products. I just wanted to expose and just reiterate, the components we have with our endpoint management and protection portfolio. Again, all these different set of tools available under this one umbrella family of products designed to manage, secure, and protect all the endpoints in your environment. So today's topic is not about all of these, so we're going to get rid of some that we're not focusing on. And these are the three products in the ZENworks family that can impact an asset management environment for you. So we'll have ZENworks Configuration Management, ZENworks Asset Management, and then Service Desk. So before we get started, my attempt is going to be to draw boundaries around some capabilities here. And the way I want to start that off is if you are a ZENworks Configuration Management customer today, then you're familiar with the terminology of assets inside ZENworks. We call them managed devices or inventory-only devices. These are the things that you put our agent on for some sort of purpose, right? The full managed agent lets you do everything within the ZENworks family. The inventory agent lets you just do the asset inventory piece of these devices, Windows, Linux, Macintosh, right? And then if you just were curious about what's on the network, ZENworks includes a discovery tool, very basic, common open source discovery products using SNMP, WMI, SSH to go off and query a device and ask you, what are you? And just bring some of that information back in the database. So what I'm trying to get at here is at the end of the day, we have this thing called a ZENworks management zone. And in that database will be the source of authority for a set of your assets in your environment. Now, for some of you, being able to manage just this much of information in a single database might constitute your interpretation of asset management. Because if I, as an administrator, I can see things about my Windows, Linux, Macintosh, iOS, Android devices, and if I can get exposed to what kind of printers or routers are at least connected on the network, for some that might constitute an asset management. But too often I've heard from some customers that saying, wait a second, network discovery is nice. It's great to know what's out there, but I want to be able to, provide a little better management of, say, my printer environment. I want to track additional information and maybe look at the life cycle of that printer. When was it purchased? How long has it been on the wire? When's its warranty expiration and so forth? So let's take your assets, network-focused assets, and look at managing them a little bit differently, as well as maybe you have concerns around peripherals connected to computers. Maybe you're concerned about tracking where monitors are or docking stations. And then if we go outside of the IT realm of your assets, let's look at maybe non-networked assets, right? Maybe you're interested in building room layout management, facilities, right? Maintenance. Maybe something like managing boilers, water heaters, HVAC systems, or, from an education perspective, think of a school bus pool, right? That's those are assets to the county, to the school system, right? So wouldn't it be nice to have some sort of broader database support than what comes with ZENworks that allows us to maybe encompass different assets and provide a management around that?
That's interesting because we leverage part of, I guess they got a collection data form in ZENworks where you can actually have your own predefined fields, where in my previous employer, we were doing IP phones, right? And we had to deploy them out and what was it connected to, which was one of the computers. So we were able to actually, when we did a physical inventory, we had fields in there for monitor serial number, IP phones, VoIP phones, and their models and so forth, so that we could actually, like you said, actually have these peripherals that we can manage as well, and be able to, when their life cycle is done, be able to replace and follow that all in the database. So that's great. Yeah, this is really exciting.
Yeah. And that's some of the things I'm hoping to distinguish is that collection data form, part of our asset inventory, I like the flexibility that it offers. So I'm excited to show that here in just a little bit. But it's worth explaining what is asset inventory. So again, we're coming now back into the boundaries of the ZENworks management zone, right? Your single database you have for your ZENworks managed devices. And core to that agent, or to our agent, is the ability to provide an inventory or discovery tool. So once we get the agent on our device, we get detailed hardware information. We get things like system make and model, who's the manufacturer, how much memory, how much CPU. We even dig into the memory slots on the drive and let you know if there's an open memory slot on the device, free used disk space. These are some of the characteristics of our hardware discovery. In addition, we get software information. So at that moment in time on that asset, when we run the discovery, we get detailed software information like who is the manufacturer, what's the name of the product, is this a trial, is it an evaluation, is it a full licensed type of product? So we collect a fair amount of information about the software. And then earlier I described if we go beyond our computer assets, our network assets, we want to look at our network assets. Again, we have a discovery tool using different protocols to query a device at that moment in time and ask it what it is. And if we know how to talk to it properly and it tells us it's a VoIP phone, we get some certain information off of that device. That now sits in our database as well. Now, the one thing I really like about our asset inventory is this concept of custom fields. And here with ZENworks 2020 Update 1, we've extended this concept of custom fields now up to 100 fields. So if you didn't know, embedded into our database schema related to inventory, especially these custom fields, we now support or have predefined fields in the database for you to make up whatever type of information you want. And I'll show you that here in just a second, some examples. But this idea sits there and says, all right, well, ZENworks, you gave me this schema focused on what information relates to hardware and software, but maybe you're missing something I care about to track.
Gotcha.
And that's where our custom data fields come in.
Yeah. Now 100 though, huh?
Yeah, we moved, used to be 20.
Yeah.
Now moved to 100.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yep. Yeah. Now, asset inventory, since Paul mentioned some of our monthly updates related to ZENworks, asset inventory, when it comes to hardware and software discovery, we approach it with 3 different technologies. We have our own monthly product recognition update where we have a couple engineers designing fingerprints related to identifying hardware and software that might be in your environment. So we publish that on a monthly basis. Again, the goal is that when it comes for discovery time, we try to find everything we can about that device. Specific to software, we also go and scrape the add remove program list. And if you turn on another option related to MSIs, we can look at the MSI database and try to identify software that way as well. So at the end of the day, we put a pretty good attempt at trying to help you normalize all the discovered data from the assets within your ZENworks environment.
And homegrown applications?
Absolutely. Homegrown applications can be added as a discoverable product.
Gotcha.
So I'm focusing on this concept of asset inventory, first to just help you realize, right, it's there. We've probably all just said inventory. I'm giving a formal name, asset inventory, and treating it as kind of a component. However, it's a free component. You don't even It's just part of all of our ZENworks products. So think about this. If you happen to be a patch management only customer, you get this whole asset inventory component. You have the ability to generate your reports based on all the hardware and software information discovered after you put the patch management agent on your devices. So wherever we put a full managed ZENworks agent, we don't care if you license just full disk encryption or you license ZENworks configuration management. All of those products, at the heart of the agent is its ability to do discovery. And the reason why the inventory is so embedded is because a lot of our internal process of ZENworks relies on inventory.
Yeah, right.
Think of our dynamic groups that we give you by default, right? Without having inventory as an embedded component, we can't pre-populate dynamic groups for you.
Good point. And even if we didn't want the full agent on there, we have the inventory only agent.
Yeah, exactly. And I've too often seen that where there's caution of a full managed device on my server estate.
Yep.
But I really need to know kind of what's out there. So here's this more lightweight agent, if you will, single purpose. All it does is just discovery on that device, but it also has the controls to come back and read from ZENworks things like a schedule to know when and how to take inventory on that device.
That's a beautiful thing.
So kind of, if I stop here and I start to see all this hardware that's on my computing environment, and again, that's probably 80% of what people might be concerned about, first of all, is just knowing what's out there. So I wanted to just pause and say, this might be your asset management tool. You have any of these ZENworks products here, they have asset inventory built in. Maybe this meets your asset management needs, just knowing what's out there. Specific to custom fields, here I want to broaden your thoughts a little bit. So there's a spot in the console where we can go and create new workstation fields, and it's literally like 2 clicks, 3 clicks, I think, where you can create any field you want related to workstation devices. So some examples might be, maybe within ZENworks, you want to start tracking the warranty expiration date of a device, right? Or you want to know that this device just came off the wire and it's going to sit in some storeroom for a little while until it can be repurposed. So what storage location did that go sit in? Recycling, the full getting the device, end of life of the device, getting it out, sold, or recycled. You know, do you have that certificate? Yes or no? Image version, right? What I'm getting at is these are potential field ideas that are not native to our schema, but through custom fields, you can quickly create and support these ideas. So if you wanted to just say, you know, I've been a Microsoft desktop deployment environment, and part of that, after I sysprep a device, sysprep embeds a version number into the registry. Well, wouldn't it be nice for ZENworks to report what image version is on all my devices?
Absolutely.
So here, because the information exists in the registry, I just go into ZENworks, create a new custom field. I go into this idea called collection data form, which helps us tell the inventory process where to go find additional information in the registry. But now I'm automatically pulling back from the device information into this particular field I've created. Or I just had a customer recently go through an asset management process where they purchased all those, 1,000 of those little stickers. And someone was responsible for having to walk around to each asset and lay down the sticker on that asset. Well, I proposed that at the time you touch the device with that sticker, why not go into the registry and mark that same data value on the sticker into the registry. So now we can have ZENworks with a custom field called business asset tag, read from the registry, and now I can centrally report on all my business asset tags. So again, asset inventory with this concept around custom fields, I'd like to think for many of you, this potentially could be an asset management system for you. Very flexible. All these fields are easily reportable, whether you use the embedded ZENworks reporting environment or you take advantage of the ZENworks reporting server. But this might be an approach to an asset management project you have. Any thoughts, comments, Paul? Any questions?
Nothing coming in from chat. Chat, if you have any questions on this, please give us a ring and shout it out in chat. But no, I just remember we leveraged this for our physical inventories, and it really helped us be able to dial in when we needed to replace those devices and order bulk devices, monitors, or machines next round, and that falls back into budgeting for that the prior year. So it really has a cascade effect of leveraging this has a cascade effect that really is valuable in a company.
Yeah, actually, when I demo ZENworks sometimes, it's amazing how fast I can go create a report that says, show me all the devices, those that have this much memory, this that have a certain set of CPU, and based on that sort of criteria, that's my budget proposal for next year. Here's the machines that don't meet the need, and that's
Right.
That's easily a 5-minute report to create in ZENworks.
Not only just the memory and the hardware, but the software too, the operating systems and who needs to be upgraded to 10 or 10 1909 or 2009. You know, it's all around. It really helps the not just the physical management of the device, but the management of the funds for your operations.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And so I hope there's some level of excitement. Again, if you have any of the ZENworks products, you've got this pretty flexible potential asset management system. All right, we're going to move on. And just a last visual. For those of you that are familiar inside of the ZENworks console, if I click on a device object itself, here I have a plain empty device, just so you can sort of see all the potential fields that's already in our database. However, if there's some information you want, there you'll see in the red boxes my custom field, any field you want. You can have up to 100 of those exist. And earlier when I proposed maybe something like storage location, and the intent of that particular data type is, you know, a frontline tech's walking around the floor to do a desktop replacement. The tech now has that device in their hand. The next time they get back to a ZENworks console, they find this device, probably mark it as retired, but then come down here and hit the edit button of this record and populate the storeroom or storage location, or whatever you call the field, right? So
Sure.
as long as we trust some human behavior for data entry, we've got a decent asset tracking system here.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and again, by pulling up the report, you can see what, and in this specific example, other information, what storage, where it's located right now, or what is attached to it right now. Is there a printer? Is there a VoIP phone? And so when the technician goes out there to replace the device, they can easily know what they have to do, what might be added to their responsibilities when they actually replace it, adding the printer or the VoIP phone or whatever.
All right. That takes us out of asset inventory, which I hope we recognize is pretty powerful in nature of itself there. However, it's not a full broad asset management system. And then if you look at our product sets, you're browsing microfocus.com, and you say, wait, there's this thing called ZENworks Asset Management. That might meet my needs. Well, it might. However, in the broad scope of asset management, that's not what ZENworks Asset Management provides. ZENworks Asset Management is very focused on helping you manage your software assets only. So what this particular product offers, first, when you enable ZENworks Asset Management, one of the more powerful pieces that I like is the software usage capability. So wherever there's a managed agent, and actually this is currently a Windows only ability, because we quite honestly get more asked about help me identify my Windows licensing. So we'll turn on a usage tracking tool at the agent level, which tracks running. How often did an app open up and it's just sitting there running, as well as how active was that application, right? So I can have 15 things minimized down on my desktop there, but when I open one of those windows, that's considered active. And at that point in time, we put in a little mechanism to start tracking how active that window's been. So now if I've got in the ZENworks database, I've got all this inventory to begin with, I now complement it with this usage information. Well, let's take on a financial persona, someone who knows the licensing environment, software licensing environment. Maybe they're the person that has all the proof of ownership information, all the purchase orders, all the contracts related to some asset purchases. So if we go through the exercise of defining and importing our purchase data, defining what licensed software we mostly care about, well, since all this data is in one database, this reconciliation process kicks in where we can help you identify, through your proof of ownership of software, how much it's been used and where it's been installed. And at that level there, we can help you create a custom report focused on maybe particular licenses that you're most interested in. So here I've got an example around Acrobat, right? So my proof of ownership purchasing says I've bought 12 copies. Now, if you just go off of software discovery alone, that returns a value saying, well, on the network, there's 8 installations. And if you stop that far from a software asset management program, you'd say, hey, I'm good. I got 4 more licenses. However, with our usage tracking, we start to see, wait a second, only 4 devices have actual usage on this, painting a very different picture that maybe I don't need those 12 licenses even to begin with, when I've really only got 4 people out of the 8 using it.
Exactly. We as an example, if I can interrupt, sorry.
Oh yeah.
So we had an expensive CAD program where we were running, and it was 10 grand a pop, right? And so we had certain people that were designated to be installed on certain machines, and we let's say had 10 versions of that. Well, that's a lot of money, 10 grand a piece. And we used the usage program to see, has so-and-so actually opened it in the last 3 months? Oh, well, no, he hasn't. Well, we don't need to either expense that, or we can give it to somebody who needs it, so that we don't have to, we can then again budget for that CAD program in a different manner by just using this report here in the reconciliation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very advantageous, yeah.
Yeah, now, one thing about ZAM is that, to a degree, it's sort of process oriented. We give you the facilities to, like, if you've got all your purchase order data, say in a spreadsheet, right, we can help you import all that data.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick.
Yep.
your contract data, right? We can get all that imported. But when it comes to defining your licenses and sort of going through the process of finding that proof of ownership, understanding its own little life cycle, was this a new purchase that went through an upgrade, that went through a downgrade, that has downgrade rights, that allows me to do more upgrades. Understanding the licensing starts to introduce a little bit of a time to be involved.
Sure.
And another involvement with asset management is, again, we do a pretty good job doing this raw level of software discovery. So we can identify all the EXEs on the device through add remove programs, MSI database, and our fingerprinting. We normalize some of those database and actually give them a software title, ideally trying to make that view easier. But at that level, we don't understand, without some time invested, is there any license implications to that general software list?
Absolutely.
So we have this thing called discovered products, which is an abstract of that software view. And one of your responsibilities as an admin is to go through that discovered product lists and start tagging the software. Is this of license concern? Or is this just public domain software and I don't really care about it?
Yeah.
So there's some process related to kind of getting to this report. This is a cool Nirvana report. It makes things like, hey, that's really what I want to get to. I want to emphasize that there's a bit of work behind the covers to prepare this. However, if you don't have the time, or you're scattered in your purchase history and just struggling to find where all that might be from a central location, I still encourage at least turning on asset management purely for the usage. Because
agreed.
one of the things you can do is when Adobe walks in the door and they tell you you're licensed for these products, well, you can return and say, look, this is where it's installed in my network and here's who's actually using it. So you may not have the full license compliance picture within ZENworks, but you would have the information needed to manage that audit process in your favor.
Sure. And like you said, there's a little component of processes that has to be followed. We had the blue sheet process, which is what we called it, and that was from purchase to delivered and installed. We had this blue sheet that would be open, and the nice thing about the asset management too is you can import those contracts. You can import, so you have records of them digitally, as well as the paperwork. So you can track them a little bit easier if you were using the full processes of the ZAM compliance. But it was very effective. We were able to utilize that and circumvent those issues, because we did have a couple of times where we had a compliance officer come in. So where do you have this installed and how many places? And we didn't have this perfected, but it sure was the usage was great because we knew with the usage where it was. But we also had the contracts available and we can do our counts and so forth. So it really, really helped reconcile a lot faster than just wondering where it was installed.
Nice.
Yep.
So to this point, I've identified sort of two options under the auspice of asset management. About ready to talk about the third one. Paul, any comments out there?
No comments yet. I think they're listening heavily. So I think we're good to move on.
How are we doing on time?
We're doing great on time. Yeah, we got another hour plus.
Awesome, perfect. Because I'm going to now touch on sort of what I find an interesting topic, and that is maybe having you think as a ZENworks configuration management customer. So that's my starting point, first of all. If you have ZENworks configuration management, hopefully you're aware of this entitlement to ZENworks Service Desk.
Right.
Now, too often, I have customers overlook the idea of service desk because it translates to a different concept. It's an incident management system. It's a ticketing system. And either you're happy with what you have or you're not happy but stuck with what you have. But when you hear, hey, you've got this entitlement of service desk, you probably brush it off because you already have something.
Sure.
Well, what I want to emphasize with this entitlement you have is maybe not viewing this product for the purpose of a ticketing environment, but maybe as an asset management environment, because the database under Service Desk is a lot more flexible than the more structured database we have in ZENworks. And it's because of this flexibility in our CMDB that we could quickly create new concepts of assets that you care for management. Remember, ZENworks database is a bit structured. We can get mobile devices, workstations, and servers, and we're pretty good at managing that. And with asset inventory, again, cover those very well. But if you remember at the beginning, where maybe you have more assets you're concerned about, or your form of management now is a little different, well, here's an idea. You have an entitlement to Service Desk, and the core of Service Desk is this CMDB, where you can create any number of categories to represent things you want to manage. Now, when you create a new category in Service Desk, we immediately give you 40 fields. They're already built into the database, much like the admin defined fields in ZENworks, right? These are already embedded in the schema. You just got to put a label on it. You know, what's the visual view of this particular field you care about? And once you create these categories, now we give you a couple to begin with, and the two I'll call out that are built in right away is the hardware category and the mobile devices category. And I'll call those out because I'll explain in a second why. But regardless if you use the existing categories or create your own categories, the note here is you get 40 fields to label however you want. So when you go into Service Desk now and you create a new item, in this case, I'm using the hardware category to create my Windows 10 workstation. And now I'm in the Service Desk interface looking at this object, and you can see these fields that I have represented. Now this is the default view of those fields. You know, I could easily go in by rearranging the category labels and start to find more relevant data that's important to me.
Sure.
Now, the question though is, do you want to go into Service Desk knowing that ZENworks is the authority for all your computers and servers? Do you want to now go in and duplicate that into Service Desk? Would you like to do that, Paul?
Did you want it on my site, or you want to go into the lab and do that? Is that what you're asking?
You're a 1,000-seat ZENworks customer. Do you want to go create 1,000
Oh,
objects?
I'm sorry. That was no. I'd like to automate some things if I possibly can.
Yeah, totally. And the initial note here is built into Service Desk is we have a default connector, and I've struggled on a way to describe this, so I've just settled my own terminology. As I call it the ZENworks connector, but it's part of the ZENworks integration with Service Desk that once you configure, Service Desk goes into the ZENworks database and pulls out your servers, workstations, and mobile devices. Along with that connector, are some predefined fields. So now I'm synchronizing data from ZENworks into Service Desk for a subset of my assets. So that's one way to get all of our ZENworks related data here into Service Desk. So we don't have to manually create this stuff. We just synchronize it.
Sure. Makes sense.
Here's an example of a printer. So I will say not a lot, but I have heard of some customers managing their print environment through spreadsheets. Well, if that happens to be the case, another import mechanism to Service Desk is we do have a template. Map your fields according to our template, and then import those into Service Desk. So what I'm kind of trying to get to is Service Desk has this connector or import process to connect to external systems to bring those assets in to Service Desk CMDB.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of what I want to focus on here in a little bit.
Okay.
Is how we get through that particular process.
And to be honest with you, I never put Service Desk in the realm of asset management. And we had that at my previous employer. We had the store, we had those things, but I mean, this just makes sense and gives us more flexibility for the product.
Yep.
Even if you don't have license for it, right?
You get 2 free technician licenses, and if you just want it for asset management, typically that's one person managing.
Yep.
Right? So you're well within a license view of something like this idea. And then if I introduce the ZENworks reporting system, now this might not be your specific target of a report, but I've had a customer ask me this, so I figured I'd share. Is it possible for me to have some common pieces of information, but related to all the different devices I care to manage, or in Service Desk terms, categories I care about? Well, my workstations, that comes from the ZENworks database. And I managed my category fields by relabeling that field. By relabeling that category to say, these are the common fields I care about, and I know I want those common fields for my workstations that comes from a connector to ZENworks. I want those to be the same for my printers that comes from my spreadsheet import. And I want that same information for maybe my phone system. So let's say we're able to connect your Service Desk to see the objects in your phone system and build a little custom connector there. So potentially using the ZENworks reporting server, we connect to your Service Desk system, and we now sort of get a more holistic business asset summary of some information that's more common that you're trying to report against. Now, nothing's to say that I couldn't just do a workstation only summary and then pick fields that are just completely specific to my workstation category. But this is at least an idea to expose within asset management for Service Desk.
Brilliant.
So with that, if there's any reason to pause for a second.
No reason to pause. Let's trudge on.
Yeah, so at this point, let's get into reviewing what these actually look like within the consoles. So let's take a look at what I've got here. So I've got an Active Directory server connected with my ZENworks appliance, along with a Service Desk appliance as well. So we're first going to go back. And if you remember in the slides, option 1 was asset inventory. So I just want to review that in case that meets your asset management needs. So if you haven't found this, well, first of all, let's just go off to any object in the database, right? After you register a device, We do have the inventory tab for that device where you find that workstation detail report I showed earlier. Now I had a blank report. Now this is an actually filled out report. The top of the screen is what we reserve for demographic data. And I'll just kind of highlight site, building, floor, room, email, telephone. If I wanted to manually edit any of that information, remember I showed you the edit button down here, and I could purposely change, record information at this point, submit the change, and away I go. So if I had storage location, or did I get my recycle certificate yet, right? Those kind of tend to be manual based on the process they're tied to. Or in this case, my business asset tag could come from a registry setting, and I'll show you that in just a second. But the workstation detail report, just a quick view of all the hardware, software that's out there, plus any custom fields that you've created. And by the way, how do we create custom fields? Well, we'll go on over here to configuration is our asset inventory tab. And we'll scroll on down to our admin defined fields. And I highly encourage everybody to mostly focus on the workstation fields. And if you want a description on the rest of the tables, happy to help. Paul and I can help explain those down the road for you. But we're going to look at the workstation fields. And again, I said, 2 or 3 clicks, right? So let's create a new field. I don't want any default value. I can change the data type if I would like. I'll just leave it as character. 20 is good enough for now. And now I've basically created a new field in the database. So the next time I'm in this workstation detail report of a device, you'll now see that available in this report. Just a new field.
And something that we'll probably have another session on, because this is more detailed. We already have your presentation mapped out, but in this case, you can have a collection data form where if they're doing a physical inventory, the technician sits in front of the machine, they open the collection data form from the Zen app window, and they can fill out the details of that new field, whether it's a VoIP phone, serial number, or monitor. So yeah, this is really valuable.
So perfect.
There's also a way to, we also had serial numbers for each floor, for each department. I'm sorry, not serial numbers. We had IP addresses for each department, and we could actually pre-populate the floor, the building, and those types of things in the demographic data through this process as well under the configuration asset inventory. You could search on those and actually pre-populate those in bulk, which was really handy. And we'll show that in another presentation.
All right. Yeah, we talked about that, and I think just exploring this whole asset inventory stuff in depth is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty broad.
And I just wanted to quick summarize. It's great to get the data entry part of this down, right? But you don't want everybody that needs to see the information to have to come into ZENworks to see it. So one of the things you could do is maybe create a report, and using the embedded custom report tool, let's just go off and call this my custom fields report. Custom fields report. We know that this was related to workstation or device data. By default, we give you a machine name, but there's my newly created admin defined field. And then what did I call the other one? New.
New, yeah.
New, there's my new workstation ADF, right? If I want to know the OS build, make, manufacturer, window platform, it's that quick and easy to create a report. Now, I probably have a lot of bogus data out here, but
Yeah.
Had I filled in the asset tag data of those fields correctly, or storage location, or warranty expiration, like I said, 5 minutes to create a quick report that views that information. And then these reports could be scheduled and then delivered via email. So that's the more important part, right? Why you want to get all these fields understood, mapped out properly, and then put data into those fields to really get the full benefit, which is to report against that environment.
Sure.
So that's the asset inventory component. So we'll switch over to asset management. And again, if you want to go to, the full nirvana, spend time through process of putting in your contract data, defining your licensed products, cleaning up what should be licensed or not through the discovered products. Then here's that nirvana report, the compliance report, right, where I can go ahead and just view all my records and whether I'm over or under licensed. And again, that process takes a while. I will admit to that, because you have to find your data first of all.
Yeah, there's some dedication behind that process, but it's very, and there's upkeep with it, right? You have to be consistent with it.
Yep. Now, if you want to sort of take a quicker, easier approach, this is my personal advantage of asset management, is just get it for the software usage piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once I turn on usage and I start collecting data, well, maybe I want to look by this guy here, and I can see the software that's been installed, how long it's been active, and how long it's been started and last used.
And for the admins out there where you have your boss come to you and say, I need to know what the activity of this person is because he's under watch, right? Because there's some employment issues. We've used this to show this is what he's doing. This is where he's been there's the web component of this as well, usage of the web. And it really helps solidify any justification for where that individual's been.
So that was just a quick refresh. If you're out looking for an asset management, you come across Micro Focus and you see ZENworks Asset Management, I'm hoping you understand it's very software focused in nature.
That's nice. That's good explanation. Thank you for that. And on the right-hand side, you also have the grouping criteria. Don't forget about that. We've used that as well.
Yeah.
Once you get your demographics in, if you want to do one department, you can easily just go to the demographic and go there and select whatever.
Yep. So now whichever report you run will be focused on whatever data is populated in the site field.
Yep. Great.
All right, so ideally, for those of you that are fairly familiar with ZENworks, hopefully this has kind of been old hat for you. If not, maybe we introduced you to a couple different ideas for you to, think deeper into what you currently own. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about this entitlement you have for Service Desk. But thinking about Service Desk as just a generic database for you to track assets against. All right, earlier we talked about a connector as a way for me to go and look at the source of authority of ZENworks to bring in some data. Well, let's go get that configured really quick. And I highly encourage using the getting started as a way to accomplish this task, because it takes you to the right part of the console. You don't have to remember to go to the setup portal, click the setup tab, click ZENworks. Getting started just gets you right there. And the first thing you populate is, well, where's my server at? Where's my ZENworks server at? And who should Service Desk log into that database as?
So this is a
Now,
ZCC administrator down here, right?
this is a ZCC administrator.
Yeah.
That is correct.
For
'Cause
that
now-
ZENworks server. Gotcha.
And we want Service Desk to use these credentials to log into the database. So now we get access to those server, mobile, and workstation tables.
Sure.
Now, before I click save, I just want to click on this import tab just to show you I currently don't have anything configured, right? So I'm in the sense of this new connector idea. Let's just quickly get that up and running. And where the getting started helps is once I say save, what's pretty cool here, Service Desk reaches out to the server as long as it logged in correctly and reads the ZDM.xml file to know
Yep.
how to log in, and we pre-populate your connector for you. We learned that it's a Postgres listening on this port, and we make it pretty easy to get connected to. Now, for the purposes of this, you'll see our connector allows us to go and look at all the software and bundles. I'm just going to stay focused on hardware at this point. And I am going to go through a staging process by not automatically creating records in Service Desk just yet.
So
here's where
items.
terminology.
So,
Sorry,
yeah,
Paul, go ahead.
yeah, I think you're covering it. Items are basically records in Service Desk.
Yeah, that's
Good term.
this becomes the interesting challenge, right? How do you
Mhm.
know the terminology in ZENworks today? We I don't know, do we call them records? Do we call them objects, right?
Yeah.
We know them as servers, workstations, and mobiles, but they're really kind of records in a database.
Yep.
Now we want to get those same records or objects over here created. However, I don't want them to be formally created. I want them to be put into a staging area just as a preparation to see what my data is going to look like. Because if I didn't like the way the data is presented, then I got to go through and clean up all my items. That's a little more manual
Manual
than
process.
if I just delete my connector and clean the staging area. So I'm going to focus on some hardware, mobile information. I'm going to now tell Service Desk, go off and take a look at what's inside that ZENworks database for me.
Now notice the
And
ZENworks import doesn't have any more tabs up there until this analyze is done.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So my system goes pretty quick right now. So I said done. I'm going to go back to my connector. And as Paul pointed out, if the analyze process succeeded, we get hardware information. Now this is a view of what was discovered inside of ZENworks. And for me in my world, I've got 2 servers that I care about. And then for my demo world, I care about these machines in this folder here. So I can click on the link, I can get a view of what's out there, and all of these will come across. And then as I go with servers, here's my servers that will come across. I could just say all managed devices if I wanted, and if I have inventoried, I could just click on all inventoried, and that way everything comes across from a synchronization perspective.
Is that the inventory only, or is that the complete inventory?
Yeah, this would be inventory only.
Gotcha.
And just, you know, Paul, you brought up a good point. Some people don't realize that when they click on devices back, now I switched into the ZENworks console, but we always click on devices and we always move our mouse down here to start some sort of movement, right? But did you ever realize you were on the managed tab versus the inventory only tab? Right? This is a different agent, so we give you a slightly different view of that. And then if you by chance turn on network discovery, well, there's where you find the results here on the devices tab. So sometimes that navigation is overlooked.
Yeah, good point.
I'll
Thanks
come
for
back to
covering
my
that. That's great.
service desk here, and now there is some ITIL related terminology we have to kind of deal with. So service desk when it creates a record, it's technically called an item. And this item abides by some rules known as a category. And I'll talk about that in a second. I just want to get some stuff starting to import, so it looks like we're making progress here. But I don't want Service Desk to call my Windows 10 workstation. I don't want Service Desk to call it 10,001. Because by default, we use a numeric system when we create items. Now that's a choice. You can have these items generated as a number. However, I like to know that if my ZENworks computer name is Windows 10, I would like to see that in Service Desk as Windows 10. So I'm going to change this to host name here. And then we're going to switch over to mobile devices. And in my world today for ZENworks, I've only got one iOS device out there, this iPad. And the same thing, I want it to be known by its name. So we've just told Service Desk where ZENworks is. We've just told it to select some things. And now let's go take a look at what happened here. So we're going to switch into this Amy snapshot world. And here are the 9 objects that came from my Service Desk space. And because this name looks pretty obvious, I'm going to look at this object here, and there's my iPad. And here's the set of data that gets pre-populated. Because this connector that we put in place, I'm going to call it the default connector, knows how to see the 30 fields in ZENworks and maps those to the mobile device category fields in Service Desk. So this mapping process is already done under the covers for this connector. And I'll show you that in a second.
And being able to, you can create things on the fly too, but you notice that it has the GUID, so we know it came from ZENworks. It wasn't something that was manually populated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, good call. Good call on that. Now, I'm not going to formally create this as an actual item. Well, you know, no, I'll do my ZENworks. I'll find my Windows 10 one. And one of these in Amy Snapshot, I know my device is called Windows 10. So give me a second to go off and search in the hardware category for something that should have Windows 10 in the list. And I've been looking at these long enough. I think, is it this one? Yeah, it's this one that's called Windows 10. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And basically what that does is it promotes it from this staging area to a formal Service Desk item. I'm going to change. I've been playing with filters here, so we're just going to go find my Windows 10 as now a formal object where I can see the details that came from ZENworks. So our default connector, this is where we'll come back to categories, and I'm just going to let you know that inside ZENworks, we characterize server objects and workstation objects by default are mapped to a hardware category. And here's that hardware category list. Remember I said we got 40 fields we can work with? Well, the installation of Service Desk predefined all of this data for us. And then when we put that connector in place, we know that the hardware category field 1 in Service Desk maps, now I'm going to be geeky here, to NC Workstation's CPU field for the server object.
Right. And you can see that if you select CPU, right?
If I select CPU, basically I get the controls of renaming this field whatever I want. And actually this could be kind of confusing, right?
Yep.
Let me just show you what I do here. Anything. Let's save that. And now let's go look at my Windows 10 here. Details.
Got anything.
I've got anything, but the data that's coming across, because our connector is currently hard-coded, that field 1 for hardware categories maps.
Yep.
NC Workstation CPU.
It's just
field.
a title or a label.
It's just a label. So earlier in my slides, when I sort of reordered this view for you, well, what that sort of meant is I went through a field mapping exercise. So I've tried to visualize this a little bit. So your starting point for asset management, one of the processes you'd go through is, all right, let's think about what categories I want to create in Service Desk. And then as part of creating the categories, out of those 40 fields, start thinking of decent field definitions that you want to expose information for. Now from the external system, whether it's like a database like ZENworks or a CSV import, you end up doing the field mapping in sort of the same way. But you have to know, like, well, the source of authority, in this case, let's say ZENworks for CPU is NC Workstation's table for CPU data. I want to make sure that comes over here to my category field 5, if I wanted, right?
Sure.
So I can relabel this stuff. Now the problem, though, is the default connector for ZENworks is that. It's a default field mapping set. So if you don't like the way that the data is presented in Service Desk, or more importantly, you're taking advantage of custom fields in ZENworks.
Right.
You now want to see those custom fields show up in Service Desk. Well, our default connector isn't flexible for that. We have to create a new connector. So I'm going to attempt to show you how to create a new connector.
Let's do it.
But I'm trying to help make sure that this is probably a really important exercise. Right? If your asset management system now, you're buying into this concept that Service Desk could be a decent asset management system for you. Well, your planning is in Service Desk first. You got to spend time thinking of what your categories will be and what your field layouts are going to be. So that, honestly, is just planning. And then, again, if by chance you have some weird goal of having, that's just so tiny, right? If you're trying to look at a common report across different asset types, but with common data, well, you want to start planning that category 1 should have, make, manufacturer, model, network address, business asset tag. Category 2 should have the same first fields. So I hope I'm putting that thought out there that there is a planning part of this if you want to have something common across all your categories. So there was the ZENworks connector, quick and easy to get up and running. And in the context of Service Desk, well, it becomes really nice. Not that I want to talk too much on ticketing right now, but once this object gets created as an item in the system, we recognize who the owner of this is. And that's one of the initial benefits, right? Is now when this owner of this item needs to make a ticket against this device, Well, when the technician is looking at this ticket, they see all this inventory data. So that's the initial use case. When you hear service desk, you think of a ticketing system and why you would want to import from ZENworks. Well, I'm changing our thoughts. Let's import from ZENworks for asset management.
Gotcha. Yeah.
All right, well, that is the default connector. So what I'm going to do now is all these, well, actually, I want to go back and delete my Windows 10 quick. I'm going to edit. Let's get this out of the system. And then I'm going to go delete my default connector. And if I'm moving too fast and people are actually wanting to track where this is, just holler, let me know, we'll go slower.
Sure.
And I want to delete that connector right there. So now the benefit is back in that Amy snapshot. Well, actually the Amy snapshot entry is gone because there's no data out there.
Right.
So that's why I like to, when I'm playing with these connectors, put them into a staging area just to see what it looks like first, because it's a lot easier to clean up. All right, Bob, you've been talking about the default connector to ZENworks. Yeah, that gets me a good 80% of the assets I care about.
Right.
But you showed me printers from a spreadsheet. Well, how do I get that into the system? So let's go on off and talk about a new part of the console called Amy, Asset Management Import Export. And if we come on over here, you'll see we give you this default template to work with. So your step one is to go get this template.
And you download it directly from the system.
Download it directly from the system. It now sits on my downloads folder, since that's where I download things. And here this is, a gargantuan number of fields. Remember, every hardware category has 40 fields to begin with, but then also every category has some default
Preset
information
fields.
to be
Right.
populated.
Yep.
So earlier I said, if your printers happen to be in a spreadsheet and you've got some fields there, well, we just need to, since I don't have Excel on this server, obviously Excel would be easier to see a comma delimited file. I would take my printer spreadsheet and put it in the proper columns that this provided. So let me give you an example what that looks like here. So line 2 right here. So I've got 3 printers. And I just followed the comma delimited headers across the top. What's the item going to be called in service desk? Who's the make, manufacturer? Whether you want to use this for a ticketing system or not, you would define who your default incident service teams are. But then as we scroll across the top here, you'll start to see there's field 1 through 40. Well, if you forgot what field 1 is, you'll need to go back into your service desk to the category for your printer and see that field 1, which is kind of useless for me, is resolution. But field 2, field 3, there's something useful. And by the way, I'm not actually using resolution because they're not active fields. I start off with field 4, 5, 6, which means now back in my spreadsheet, the position of field 4, 5, and 6 in the comma delimited world needs to make sure I'm mapped to
IP address, yeah.
Yeah, there's IP address and network name, right? So this is just a CSV manipulation process, right? We give you the template with the proper headers. And then in each column or comma delimited section, you put in the data that you're interested in. And since I'm focusing this to be only printers, well, when I'm back here in my Amy world, I now go to step 2. And this particular focus was going to be on printers that I would go and browse to my import and then upload that information. And now I have a whole bunch of newly created items that relate to that category I described.
And the, I know the one way of if you did a discovery for what's out on the network, and you have some of that populated, you could then, I think, export that as a CSV, and then you'd have to put it in the right columns, but you'd have that stuff from that you've already done some of that pre-work done in ZENworks.
Yep.
Over to Service Desk. Yeah.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I would use we don't make it easy to report against network discovered assets in the generic reporting tool, but using ZENworks reporting server, get to those network discovered assets, export them to a CSV. Absolutely.
Line up the columns and you're good. Yep.
Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. I've exposed you to a default connector. I've now exposed you to the CSV format. And this drop-down list, again, whenever you go create a new category, you're just matching your import against the category you're trying to track. Now the last piece, this gets to be a little more complicated, which is Bob didn't like the default connector because I do want to bring asset tag, right? I've started branding a new custom field in ZENworks called business asset tag. And my processee over there says, you know, ZENworks is going to look at a workstation's registry to bring that field back, right? That's a known process in ZENworks. But now I want that custom field brought into Service Desk. And the default connector doesn't know how to handle that. So I had to make my own connector. And we can give you the default connector. Now, we've got a bunch of older systems in our list that we had familiarity with in the past. We haven't spent as much time putting an emphasis on making sure we have canned connectors, A, for every product, and B, for all new products. But if you have one of these products from the past, you could export this configuration file. It's in the form of an XML, and start to learn what does it mean for Service Desk to connect to another system. So what I did here is I came out here and I grabbed the latest ZENworks version. So I exported that for me. And where's my notepad? I didn't open that one up. So let's just go and open that one up. There it is. Edit with notepad. So this is the default connector, if you will. And I will tell you, this is probably going to take you easily half hour to sort of understand the layout and the format. My goal is just to kind of highlight some of the key pieces. But the top part of this starts to be the database calls on how we identify devices. And you'll see we heavily work off the NC workstation. and Z device tables from ZENworks. Once we define our connection to those tables, in this case, my category is hardware. Well, I didn't like the default connector. Maybe I don't want to keep using the category for hardware then either. So maybe I go create a new category. I call it servers. And then I create a category called workstations, and I create a category called mobiles. Now, as I create each of those, and why don't I just show you that also real quick, right? Let's go off and create a new category. New, and we'll just leave it as new category. Here's what you're presented with. All 40 fields are active. It's not sort ordered by default. I like to switch it over to either system or user defined. That way my fields are consecutive. Because ultimately this is how they're displayed on the item object details page. So my exercise would be going off and relabeling every field however I want. Do I make it active? Do I make it required? Go through and make all those changes. And in my idea, I wanted my servers, workstations, and mobile devices to always have the same first 10 fields. So if that's attractive to you, going through this exercise, cleaning this up, is just time. But once you're done with it, where's my new category? I could just duplicate it and give it a new category name.
I like that tip on making the first 10 the same for each. So because you can turn them on and off as active and not active, but at least it gives it consistency and an understanding. That's great.
Yeah, so one idea I had was, all right, first of all, what are the most important pieces of information for you? And let's say that boils down to, 15 pieces of information. Generic things like what department, what building, what floor, what's the name, what's the IP address, how much memory, how much CPU, what's the operating system. That might all be generic in nature, which seems to fit across, printers, mobiles, maybe docking stations, maybe monitors, I don't know. But I still got 25 other fields to work with. So in my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe fields 16 to 20 start to be a little more specific to my printers. 21 to 25 is specific to my mobiles. 26 to 30 is specific to this category or that category. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful tip. Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So back to our connector now. This is that raw view on how Service Desk is going to try to connect to whatever destination system. In this case, it's a ZENworks system, right? Because we're pulling from NC Workstation. And once we get the queries correct, and again, the default connector tells me how to properly connect, then I just went through here and did my field mappings, right? I know in Service Desk that I labeled it as CPU, so I put in comments just to keep track of what I'm doing. But I know Service Desk Field 1 is CPU information. Well, when I go off into ZENworks, let's find what that field is. And we can make the data look pretty by labeling it as in megahertz, or if I wanted to change it to gigahertz, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
So the trick is now, how does Service Desk see these columns in ZENworks? Or like, how did I know what these fields are? So there's a little trick here that I had to go through. And I'm going to switch over to my Service Desk console. And we'll pause after I type this all in here. Because thinking and typing isn't working at the moment. Import. So this field, and I'm sorry if that looks small, but VA storage, lifetime asset import, and not a field, I meant to say directory. This is where those connectors come into play. We end up, every time you add or remove a connector, we create a directory structure related to that. And I'll just pick the first directory, tab through it, because there's nothing in those folders we care about until we get to the asset import. And this becomes, sort of that little nugget of knowledge. Here's how Service Desk knows to get to ZENworks tables. Right, I kept saying NC Workstation, so for you geeks that are, familiar with our database, well, there's the Z device table, there's the ZZen object table. Again, NC Workstation, right? So we've pre-populated a lot of the tables, and if I want to look at, what are the columns, let's go with NC Workstation, right? Look at the XML file where you start to see the columns. So there's ZENworks, prop stands for property. Property, ZENworks agent ID, property management ID, property machine name, inventory type, asset type. So ideally, you have an understanding of what these fields are in ZENworks, and most of them are self-understanding. Machine name, site, department, all generally make sense, and you know what data is put into that in ZENworks. Now that I know machine name, prop site, prop department, that allows me now to know if field 1 in Service Desk is for CPU, well, then I need to go out and bring prop speed.
That's the mystery for I was not aware of the details of that, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, this is sort of this mapping exercise right with the raw XML file.
If you want to go all custom.
If anybody takes on this task, I'd be more than happy to try to help stumble through what kind of mapping you'd like to put in place. I did learn that my approach anyway was I went and got the default connector. And again, I told you servers, oops, no, where's my items? Item type, there's hardware. So let me just collapse that one. This default connector has bundles, software. So what I did is I realized, well, from a hardware asset management system, I just grabbed this whole tag, oops, right? And I put that into my own XML file.
And then you adjust it from there.
And because I created a Service Desk category called Workstations, I need to make sure I map that up correctly. Nothing special in the workstation queries that are defined, so we don't have to play with something that's sort of well known at this point, but it was just a matter of doing my field mapping.
Sure.
Now, I will say mobile devices gave me an interesting challenge. let's go bring up when I was just focused on mobiles myself, right? So the thing that I learned, well, bear with me a second. I'm going to bounce back into ZENworks for a second. And ideally, this hasn't timed out. Oh, you did. Mobile devices are structured in two different tables. I'll just leave it at that and sort of show you that when I'm in the ZENworks console, you know, here I see these fields, and then this looks nice, right? This is a pretty view, but this all comes from one table. I think it's what, Z mobile device, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Let me show you a different view of mobile devices. Sugar pie. Let me go back. Because although this is not a cellular device, which is why I don't see IMEI, but that is information we collect from a mobile device. Is it
Right.
phone? We're going to collect the IMEI serial number, but it's not displayed here. Let me show you the trick on how you can see that. So I like to just go to our canned device report by manufacturer and model. And then here's my device. So now I can get this common workstation detail view of a mobile device. So I'm probably getting you frustrated thinking like, well, why doesn't the mobile device have a detailed inventory link like the computer and servers do, right? I go to those objects, I click on inventory, I click on workstation detail report, and there I am.
Right.
Well, we don't really have that for mobiles yet. So you got to kind of go this different path. But here's where I see custom fields that I can populate on my mobiles. But it's also this report that shows me if this had IMEI data. So when you see this report, this comes from NC Workstation table. So as I was digging around with this, I learned that some of the fields I wanted to present in Service Desk came from two different tables. So I had to dig in, and here's the default workstation query. I went and made my own mobile device query, pulling from Z mobile device. So now when I come down here, and this was just an example, I think it was like network name or network address. What did I do here? Oh, I didn't do it in this one. I don't have any MB queries to bring in the IMEI, but I did that after I consolidated all my servers and workstations into one report. I think I then, where's my, I gotta get up here and collapse. Oh, there's mobiles. All right, so I've been playing with a bunch of different connectors. Maybe it was in this connector where I then brought in IMEI. Oh, that's my servers. Let me get to mobiles. Here's mobile list. And there's my field 7, in this case, represents MAC address for computers and servers. But I figured I can pop in the IMEI number if it's a mobile device.
Ah, okay. And I see the MB query there. Yep.
And the MB query lets me now get to the Z device table. So then, you know, what I did back there, let's go back to the, not ZRS, but Z mobile. Right, so now I'm looking at what are all the objects out here, and that's where I found prop IMEI.
Perfect. Just finding where the bodies are buried.
That's exactly what this exercise was. So we're going to wrap this up by, let's put these connectors in place and just kind of show you what the results look like. All right, so I've got my connectors. I don't need to be in Notepad Plus anymore. I don't need there. Let's come back into Service Desk. I believe I shut off my ZENworks connector.
Yeah, you did.
So now what I want to do is, after I downloaded my AMI connector, we got to get that loaded into Service Desk. So I'm going to come over here to Customize. I need to do an upload for a new configuration. Let's go and create new. I'm going to go browse to my mappings file. And in this case, after I was playing with mobile separately, server separately, and workstation separately, I just combined them all into one big file.
Perfect.
All right, I know my system is Postgres. I know the name of my ZENworks database. I know who I have to log in as to get into the database. And by the way, this is the data from the ZENworks ZDM.xml file.
Right.
So we're going to get Service Desk aware of this new connector. And by the way, you'll see I called it Bob. So let me just kind of go back to the connector, and up at the very top,
Yeah, okay.
version 1, author Bob. Now we're going to go over to setup. We're going to create a new connector, and we're going to use the mapping that I just created. And I'm going to call this one Bob's mapping. All the other data is pretty populated. I just need to point to where the server is. Again, I'm not going to auto create. I'm going to do a test just to make sure I can connect to it. Save it. And I don't get an analyze function in this view. I just go directly and get everything. That's the intent of this custom connector. So for good or bad, that's what happens now is I'm going to get a whole bunch of more data. And by the way, on this system, this takes a solid minute
Okay.
to run. So I'm just going to kind of go back to where we would find all of this. Oh, maybe it ran already. Yeah, Bob's mapping. Oh, wow, it ran quick. Okay, good. So in theory, somewhere out here from Bob's mapping, one of my workstations I know happens to be called Win10. Let's go find it. I think it's this middle one. And notice that I'm going to go and actually create this for you because it might be easier to see it from the item detail view. And that's one way I changed what was the default. Let's see if I can make these kind of work together here. Oh, I have to show you in screen mode, so sorry. But that's not the default view, right? This is now a custom view.
Custom view, right.
That I brought in.
Brilliant. Well, that really gives us a full holistic view of the Service Desk CMDB, and more than I even realized. So it's really going to be interesting to play with that. I've done a little bit on the custom, but only for troubleshooting. So it would be nice to be able to map out my own in a particular pattern, then you can do it custom.
That's kind of what I hope today was a little bit thought-provoking.
Sure.
Because again, if you're after an asset management tool and you happen to be a ZENworks customer, I'd like to think we have a bunch of options for you.
A bunch of options.
And like I said, I'm going to just take the last couple of seconds here, Paul,
Sure.
and say it's great. Okay, we got data in a database. It's cool. I can kind of look at it, go to the details of an item, but wouldn't it be better if I had a more holistic report?
Give us a punchline.
There we go, right? So if you're familiar with ZENworks Reporting Server, ideally you know how to go to the ZENworks database for hardware objects or audit or bundle data, right? But if you didn't know, we also have a service desk domain, which means now I can take the ZENworks Reporting Server and go directly to service desk. And all of the data that we've been talking about sits in these tables here, this configuration. So we'll go ahead and I'll just walk you through some ideas here.
Got about 4 minutes, just so you know. I think you got enough time.
Table, perfect, yeah. Where's my full data? I like to bring my category name. Let's group by category name. I also don't care about all the categories out there, so I change my filter so that way it's just mobile devices and workstation. All right, now I clean that up a little bit. Then I start getting some item numbers. What's out there? Oh, I still have some stuff being cleaned up, but there's my Windows 10, and there's my, this one happens to be my mobile device, right?
Yes.
Now, because in my case, I made sure field 1 represented consistent data across both of these categories. When I bring this field name over, oops, looks like I got a bad connector in place. I forgot to update the mobile device connector so that way it showed CPU.
Oh, right.
And I know that field 2, obviously I'm going to get this wrong because I mixed up my connectors, right? But now field 2, ideally all these would be the same.
Yeah, consistency across the board.
Yeah, so I kind of just forgot that.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's creating a custom report towards service desk, picking the categories you care about with the fields of information you pre-planned earlier.
Certainly. Yeah, it seems like the tools are all there. It's learning what those tools are and how they fit together. And I think you've done a great job in showing us ZCM and ZAM and what the basic we've been exposed to for a long time. But even with Service Desk, the hidden asset inventory or asset management that it has and its capability is pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm more than happy to help. Whatever follow-up you need there, Paul, happy to help out. But I think this is some pretty cool stuff.
Sure, I think it's great stuff, and you're a great resource. Should they need to they can contact me or yourself, either through the ZENcast or via email, and we'd be happy to explain some more stuff that might be needed. Let me decrease this size. So yeah, there you go. So there's Bob's email there. It's powerful, and it's something that I learned even today that had I been a customer still, find it very valuable in those small tweaks and tips that you showed us, of something that we didn't have to go to any more expense for. So I really appreciate you coming aboard and being with us. Bob, thank you very much. We're happy to have you. We'll probably be doing more asset management later with the collection form and stuff like that, and maybe have some input from you there as well. But I think you did a great job. Any other questions out there in chat before we just start, before we go to the end here? Let's see if there's any other questions out there. I don't see any other questions. So, well, Bob, thank you very much for your time today. It's been very valuable. You gave us some great information, and I'm sure they'll get a lot of this as a great resource for them.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Take care.